My name is Joseph, and this is my story. I was in a dark, cold cell, forgotten by the world. Then, one day, everything changed. Guards came to fetch me with urgency in their eyes, telling me that Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, had been tormented by troubling dreams and needed me to interpret them. As I stood before him, I saw the worry etched on his face, and the tension in the air was palpable. The dreams that had disturbed him were strange and filled with symbols that I knew had a deep meaning. This was my chance not only to escape the prison, but to alter the fate of an entire nation. Pharaoh, looking desperate, said to me, "I've had 2 dreams that no wise man or magician has been able to interpret. I've heard that you can interpret dreams. Is that true?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment, and replied with humility, "It is not I who interpret the dreams, but God who provides the right interpretation." Pharaoh then recounted his dreams in detail. "In my first dream, I saw 7 fat and healthy cows emerging from the Nile, followed by 7 skinny and sickly cows that devoured the fat ones. In the second dream, I saw 7 plump and healthy ears of grain, followed by 7 thin and scorched ears blasted by the east wind, which devoured the good ones. No one has been able to explain the meaning of these dreams to me. As I listened to Pharaoh's dreams, I felt God's presence guiding my every word. With confidence, I spoke the interpretation. Both of Pharaoh's dreams share the same meaning. I explained, "God has revealed to you what he is about to do. The 7 fat cows and the 7 full ears represent 7 years of abundance. The 7 skinny cows and the 7 scorched ears represent 7 years of famine. Egypt will first experience 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of severe scarcity." Pharaoh, who had been troubled by these dreams for so long, was stunned but relieved. The answer he sought had finally been revealed to him. But I knew my next step was crucial. I had to advise him on what should be done to prepare for the years of famine that were coming. So I boldly said, "You must seek out a wise and discerning man and put him in charge of all the land of Egypt. During the 7 years of plenty, gather 1/5 of the harvest and store it in granaries. This way, there will be enough food for the 7 years of famine that will follow, and the land will not be destroyed by the scarcity." Pharaoh, deeply impressed by my wisdom and guidance, stood up from his throne and looked at me with admiration. "Could we find anyone like this man in whom is the Spirit of God?" he asked. In that moment, everything changed. Pharaoh appointed me as governor of Egypt, making me second in command after him. He gave me his signet ring, fine linen garments, and a gold necklace. From being a slave and prisoner, I was now the savior of Egypt. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. From the prison to the palace, all of it was the work of God. He had guided me and provided me with the wisdom I needed to fulfill this role. As I stood there in my new position, surrounded by the wealth and power of Egypt, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. My life has been filled with both trials and blessings, and this is only a part of my incredible story. But who am I really, and why was I once locked up in a prison? Let me share with you the rest of my story, one that begins in the land of Canaan with my father Jacob, who is also known as Israel. I was born in the land of Canaan, and you surely know my father Jacob, also known as Israel. He descended from Abraham, which means my family was the chosen lineage of God's promise. My parents had 12 children, and I was the 11th. But despite being near the end of the line, I always felt there was something special about my purpose in life. My mother, Rachel, was my father's favorite, and because of that, I became his favorite as well. This special treatment was evident to all, especially when my father gave me a colorful robe, a gift that symbolized his unique love for me. This only fueled the jealousy of my brothers, and it didn't help that God sent me dreams. dreams that seemed to show that one day I clearly remember one of those dreams. We were out in the field, binding sheaves of grain, when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. My brothers, already bitter with envy, couldn't stand this. "Do you really think you will reign over us?" They sneered. Even my father Jacob was taken aback when I told him another dream. The sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. My father was uneasy, but kept my words in his heart, pondering their significance. This growing favoritism and my dreams intensified my brother's resentment and hatred. One day my father sent me to check on my brothers and our sheep in Shechem. Little did I know that simple task would change my life forever. As I approached, their jealousy transformed into a deadly plan. "Here comes the dreamer," they said. "Let's kill him and see what becomes of his dreams." But Reuben, the eldest, tried to save me. "Don't shed blood," he said. "Throw him into this dry well, but don't lay a hand on him." His plan was to rescue me later and bring me back to our father. However, when I arrived, they stripped off my robe and threw me into the well, alone, cold and terrified. I sat at the bottom, while my brothers sat nearby and ate, unmoved by my distress. Then, just as I was losing hope, a caravan of Ishmaelites from Gilead appeared, their camels laden with spices, balm and myrrh, heading to Egypt. That's when Judah, one of my brothers, came up with a new plan. "What profit is there in killing our brother and hiding his death?" he said. "Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. After all, he's our brother, our own flesh and blood." My brothers agreed, and they pulled me up from the well. They sold me for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took me away to Egypt. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a much larger journey that God had planned for me. At the age of 17, my life was turned upside down. Torn from the comfort of my home, I was sold into slavery in a foreign land. My brothers, driven by jealousy, took my beautiful multicolored robe, given to me by my father as a symbol of his special love, and shredded it, staining it with goat's blood. They presented it to my father with a wicked deception, saying, "We found this. See if it is your son's robe." My father immediately recognized it and uttered words that pierced my soul. "It is my son's robe. A wild animal has devoured him. Joseph has been torn to pieces." In that moment, my father, Jacob, tore his clothes in mourning and wept for me for many days. His children tried in vain to comfort him, but his grief consumed him. "I will mourn for my son until I go down to the grave," he declared. This was the beginning of an incredibly painful chapter for my family. Meanwhile, I, Joseph, was being transported to Egypt, unaware that these events, though painful, were part of a much greater plan crafted by God. I did not yet know how my faith would be tested, but I trusted that the God of my fathers had a purpose for me. Upon arriving in Egypt, I was bought by Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guard. Though I was a stranger in a foreign land, God did not forsake me. I worked hard, and God's blessing upon me made everything I touched flourish. Potiphar, recognizing the success I brought to his household, entrusted me with full responsibility for everything he owned. From the fields to the finances, I oversaw it all. The Lord's favor was evident in every aspect of my work, and Potiphar, no longer concerned about his possessions, but with this trust came temptation. Potiphar's wife, noticing my success and perhaps my strength of character, repeatedly tried to seduce me. But I stood firm and refused, saying, "How could I commit this great evil and sin against God?" One day, when no one else was around, she grabbed my cloak and insisted I lay with her. But I fled from her, leaving my cloak behind. Enraged by my rejection, Potiphar's wife falsely accused me of attempting to rape her. Enraged, Potiphar, in prison, It seemed that my life had hit rock bottom. Yet even there, God's hand was upon me. The prison warden, noticing my integrity and work ethic, put me in charge of all the other prisoners. Everything I did thrived because the Lord was with me. It was in this dark and lonely place that I met two important figures from Pharaoh's court, the cupbearer and the baker. Both had disturbing dreams one night, and, troubled, they did not know what to make of them. Seeing their distress, I spoke to them. "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me, please." The cupbearer shared his dream, describing a vine with 3 branches that blossomed and bore grapes, which he squeezed into Pharaoh's cup. I interpreted his dream, saying, "In 3 days you will be restored to your position." Encouraged by the positive interpretation, the baker shared his dream of 3 baskets of bread on his head, with birds eating from them. I told him, "In 3 days you will be executed," just as I had foretold. 3 days later, the cupbearer was restored to his position and the baker was executed. Before the cupbearer left, I asked him to mention my plight to Pharaoh, but he forgot about me. For 2 years I remained in prison. Then one day, Pharaoh had 2 troubling dreams that no wise man in Egypt could interpret. In the first, he saw 7 healthy cows, followed by 7 thin and sickly cows that devoured the fat ones. In the second dream, he saw 7 full ears of grain, followed by 7 scorched ears blasted by the east wind, which consumed the good one. When the cupbearer heard of Pharaoh's dilemma, he remembered me. I was summoned before Pharaoh, and I told him, "It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer." I explained the meaning of the dreams, saying, "The 7 fat cows and the 7 full ears represent 7 years of plenty, and the 7 thin cows and the 7 scorched ears represent 7 years of famine. Egypt will first experience 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of severe shortage." I then advised Pharaoh to appoint a wise and prudent man to oversee the storage of grain during the years of plenty, so that Egypt could survive the coming famine. Pharaoh and all his servants found my interpretation and advice favorable. Pharaoh, amazed by the wisdom I had been given, said, "Can we find another man like this in whom the Spirit of God dwells?" He then placed me in charge of all the land of Egypt, declaring, "Only on the throne will I be greater than you." Thus, from being a slave and prisoner, I was elevated to the 2nd highest position in Egypt. God had used my trials and faithfulness to bring about his perfect plan. At the age of 30, I was adorned with fine linen garments, and a gold necklace was placed around my neck. I was also given the Egyptian name Zaphanea Paneah. During the 7 years of abundance, we stored an immeasurable amount of grain, so much, in fact, that it could not be counted, as if it were the sand of the sea. When the years of famine arrived, the people of Egypt cried out to Pharaoh for food, and he directed them, "Go to Joseph and do as he tells you." I opened the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, as well as to all the neighboring countries, for the famine was severe and widespread. The scarcity did not only affect Egypt, but also the surrounding lands. Even in Canaan, my family suffered. Word of the grain in Egypt reached my father Jacob, who in his desperation said to my brothers, "Why are you just standing there looking at each other? I've heard there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die." With that, my 10 older brothers journeyed to Egypt, leaving Benjamin, the youngest, behind with our father. When they arrived, they stood before me, but they did not recognize me. However, I instantly recognized them. As I watched my brothers bow before me, I remembered the dreams from my youth, dreams that foretold this very moment. In that instant, I felt a mix of emotions: anger, confusion, but also an overwhelming sense of destiny. I accused them of being spies, of coming to look for the vulnerabilities of our land. My brothers, unaware of my true identity, insisted they were honest men, sons of the same father, and that they had a younger brother at home. I could hardly contain the emotions that rose in me when I heard them speak of my brother Benjamin. I had to test their sincerity, so I told them that one of them must stay in prison while the rest of them returned with grain for their families and brought back their younger brother to prove they were not spies. For 3 days I locked them up, contemplating the next step. On the 3rd day I told them, "Do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined in jail, and you take grain for the famine of your houses. But bring me your younger brother. This will prove your words, and you will not die." As they sat in the prison, they began to reflect on their past actions. They said to one another, "We have truly sinned against our brother, for we saw the distress of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we did not listen. This distress has come upon us because of it." Reuben, the oldest, reminded them, "Did I not speak to you, saying, 'Do not sin against the young man,' and you did not listen? Now his blood is demanded of us." They didn't realize that I understood every word they said, for I had spoken to them through an interpreter. Overcome with emotion, I stepped aside and wept, but I returned and seized Simeon, binding him before them. 5 of my brothers loaded their grain, and I secretly placed the money they had paid inside their sacks. When they reached their destination and discovered the money, they were troubled, fearing the worst. Upon returning to Canaan, they told our father Jacob everything, including the demand to bring Benjamin. Jacob, distressed, said, "You have deprived me of my children. Joseph is not here, Simeon is not here, and now you want to take Benjamin?" As the famine continued, my father, after much anguish, agreed to send Benjamin with my brothers, carrying gifts and double the amount of money to return what had been found in their sacks. My brothers returned to Egypt with Benjamin. Upon seeing them, I ordered my steward to take them to my house. When they arrived, they were anxious and spoke about the money found in their sacks. But my steward reassured them, saying, "Peace be unto you. Do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father have put treasure in your sacks. Your money has come to me." Then I released Simeon and reunited him with the others. Seeing Benjamin again, my heart was overwhelmed. I invited them to dine and seated them by birth order, which amazed them. I served them myself, giving Benjamin 5 times the portions of the others. I wanted to test their loyalty further, so I instructed my steward to fill their sacks with grain, return their money, and place my silver cup in Benjamin's sack. The next morning, as my brothers departed, my steward caught up with them and accused them of stealing the cup. Confident in their innocence, they said, "Let the one in whom the cup is found die, and we will become slaves to my lord." But when the cup was discovered in Benjamin's sack, my brothers were filled with despair, tearing their garments in grief. When my brothers returned to my house, and Judah, with courage and a heart full of love, stepped forward to speak in defense of Benjamin, he offered to stay as a slave in his place, hoping to spare our father from any further agony. At that moment, I could no longer hold back the flood of emotions within me. I ordered all the Egyptians to leave the room, and, overcome by the weight of the moment, I wept. And then, in the most intimate and transformative moment of my life, I revealed myself to my brothers. "I am Joseph, your brother, the one you sold into Egypt. Now do not be distressed or regret selling me here, for it was God's plan to preserve life by sending me ahead of you." I shared with them how God's hand had guided every step of my journey, how He had worked in my life to save not only Egypt, but many other lives as well. My father and the entire family must come to live in Egypt, where I will sustain them through the remaining years of famine. When Pharaoh heard about my family, his heart was moved, and he ordered that they be brought to Egypt with chariots and provisions, to ensure their comfort and well-being. My brothers returned to Canaan with the news, and when my father Jacob heard that I was alive, he could hardly believe it. But when he saw the chariot sent by Pharaoh, the realization struck him with such force that he cried out, "Jacob, my father, and the whole family came to Egypt." The moment of reuniting with my father was, without a doubt, one of the most emotional moments of my life. After so many years of separation, I finally saw his face again. Upon seeing him, I fell on his neck and wept for a long while, unable to contain the overwhelming joy and relief. My father, too, could hardly contain his emotions, and he said, "Now I can die in peace, for I have seen your face and know that you are still alive." We wept together, holding on to each other, each tear carrying the weight of the years we had lost. I reassured him that I would take care of him and the entire family, ensuring they were safe and provided for in Egypt. I then brought my family before Pharaoh, and when my father entered Pharaoh's presence, he blessed him. Pharaoh, curious and moved by the wisdom of my father, asked him how old he was. My father replied with humility and wisdom, "The years of my pilgrimage are 130. Few and difficult have been the days of the years of my life, and they do not compare to the years of the life of my ancestors in the days of their pilgrimage." Pharaoh, struck by my father's age and the profound wisdom in his words, graciously allowed us to dwell in the land of Goshen, the finest part of Egypt. There, in the land of plenty, I settled my family, granting them possessions in the land and ensuring they were sustained during the years of famine. It was a moment of peace, prosperity, and fulfillment. A testament to the way God had woven his plan through the trials and triumphs of my life. The famine endured with relentless severity, and hunger spread like a shadow across the land. The vast stores of grain I had accumulated during the years of abundance were carefully distributed to ensure that no one would perish. People from Egypt and beyond its borders came to me, desperate to buy grain. As their money ran out, I proposed a new solution, trading their livestock for food. This arrangement worked for a time, but eventually the livestock too was depleted. With no other options left, the people offered their land and even their services in exchange for bread. I told them, "Give me your lands and yourselves, and I will give you bread in return, so you may live and not die, and the land shall not be desolate." Pharaoh, in turn, acquired all the lands of Egypt, with the exception of those belonging to the priests, who retained their properties due to the ration they received. To maintain stability during this crisis, I enacted a new law. 1/5 of the harvest would belong to Pharaoh, while the remaining 4/5 would go to the farmers. This measure ensured that Egypt would endure the hardships of famine while safeguarding its people's livelihoods. My father, Jacob, lived in Egypt for 17 years. As his days grew shorter, he called for my sons Manasseh and Ephraim to bless them. As I stood by his bedside, he told me, "The Almighty God appeared to me in the land of Canaan and blessed me." In a profound gesture, my father adopted my 2 sons, elevating them to the same status as my own brothers, Reuben and Simeon. He placed his hands on them, crossing his right hand over Ephraim the younger and his left over Manasseh the older. When I attempted to correct him, he replied, "I know, my son, I know. He too will become a nation, and he too will be great. But his younger brother will be greater than he, and his offspring will become a multitude of nations." Then Jacob called all his sons to bless them and prophesy over their futures. Each son received a blessing, tailored to their character and deeds. To Judah my father said, "The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall the gathering of the peoples be." Jacob gave us clear instructions about his burial, expressing his desire to be laid to rest in the cave of Machpelah, beside our ancestors Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, and Leah. After giving us these final instructions, Jacob drew up his feet into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. The grief I felt was indescribable. I wept, kissed my father, and bid him farewell. I ordered the physicians to embalm his body, a process that took 40 days. All of Egypt mourned for him for 70 days, a testament to the profound respect and love they had for him. After the mourning period, I sought Pharaoh's permission to take my father's body back to Canaan, and he granted it without hesitation. What followed was a grand procession. Pharaoh's servants, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt accompanied us. We left our children and livestock in Goshen and traveled with chariots and horsemen. When we reached the threshing floor of Atad, just across the Jordan, we held a solemn mourning for 7 days, honoring my father's memory. Eventually, we laid him to rest in the cave of Machpelah, just as he had requested. After my father's passing, my brothers became fearful, unsure of what my response would be after all that had transpired. They approached me with caution, saying, "Your father commanded before his death, saying, 'Thus shall you say to Joseph, I beg you now to forgive the wickedness of your brothers and their sin, for they treated you poorly.' They bowed down before me and said, 'Behold, we are your servants.'" At hearing this, I was overcome with emotion. I wept and gently reassured them, "Fear not. Am I in the place of God? You intended harm against me, but God meant it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." I lived in Egypt for many more years, watching my children and grandchildren grow. Before my death, I reminded my brothers that God would indeed visit the children of Israel and bring them to the land he had promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I made them swear to carry my bones with them when they left Egypt. At the age of 110 years, I passed away and was embalmed. My body was placed in a coffin in Egypt, awaiting the day when the children of Israel would be set free and taken back to the promised land. My journey, filled with moments of triumph and despair, betrayals and reconciliations, and dreams turned into reality, stands as a powerful testimony to God's unwavering faithfulness and providence. Through all the trials, I have come to understand that even when the path is fraught with hardships, God's greater purpose prevails. His perfect plan unfolds for those who place their trust in Him, no matter how uncertain the road may seem. My story is a reminder that God can transform the deepest valleys into mountaintops of blessing. As you continue this journey of discovery, I invite you to delve deeper into the sacred verses. In the next video, you will learn about my great-grandfather, Abraham, the father of the 12 tribes of Israel and the first to receive God's covenant of the promised land. Discover the profound biblical story of Abraham and see how his life shaped the foundation of our faith. Click now to explore this incredible story and uncover the legacy that continues to inspire millions. Dear brother, if you're going through a lot of troubles in life, we'd like to share with you some useful pieces of advice inspired by the content of this video. We hope these tips will be helpful. Embrace adversity as a catalyst for growth. Joseph's life story is a testament to how hardships can transform us into stronger, more capable individuals. Rather than shying away from challenges, consider them opportunities to learn, grow, and ultimately shape a future that would have been impossible without them. Every setback can be a stepping stone to something greater. If you approach it with the right mindset, trust in a bigger plan, even when the path is unclear. Joseph's journey, filled with betrayal, rejection, and imprisonment, was difficult to understand at the time. However, every moment led him to his ultimate purpose. Even when life seems uncertain or chaotic, trust that there is a greater plan unfolding. Patience and faith in the process can bring clarity and purpose to the most challenging of times. Choose forgiveness over revenge. After being betrayed by his brothers, Joseph could have sought vengeance, but instead he chose forgiveness. This act of grace not only healed his relationship with his brothers, but also allowed him to move forward with peace. In moments of conflict, make the choice to forgive. It's not about excusing the wrong, but freeing yourself from the burden of anger and resentment. Integrity is key, even when no one is watching. Joseph's refusal to give in to temptation when Potiphar's wife tried to seduce him shows the importance of integrity, even in difficult circumstances. When you uphold your principles, regardless of the situation, you strengthen your character and lay the foundation for long-term success. Use your success to help others. When Joseph became second in command in Egypt, he didn't hoard his newfound wealth or power for himself. Instead, he used his position to save not only Egypt, but also surrounding nations, including his own family. True success is not just about what you achieve, but about how you use your resources to uplift others. As you climb, bring others along with you. Learn to navigate difficult relationships with wisdom. Joseph's relationship with his brothers was fraught with jealousy, betrayal, and misunderstandings. However, he navigated this tension with wisdom, choosing to test his brother's sincerity before revealing his true identity. When dealing with complicated relationships, take the time to understand the other person's perspective and trust your instincts, but also seek divine guidance. Joseph was guided by his strong faith and relationship with God throughout his life. In moments of uncertainty, Joseph chose to trust God's wisdom. While it's important to trust your own instincts, remember to also seek divine guidance, whether through prayer, reflection, or the advice of trusted mentors. This balance can help you make better decisions and navigate life's challenges with clarity. Be patient with the process of change. Change doesn't happen overnight. Joseph's life shows us that personal transformation, whether in terms of career or character, often takes time. Be patient with yourself and with others as you go through growth and change. Just as Joseph had to wait through many seasons of hardship before seeing the fruits of his labor, trust that the effort you put in will eventually lead to growth and fulfillment. Be mindful of your choices as they shape your future. Joseph's decisions, both small and large, had a profound impact on his life. Whether it was the decision to forgive his brothers or the wisdom he shared with Pharaoh, every choice he made contributed to the outcome of his story. In your own life, make mindful decisions that align with your values and long-term goals. Your choices today will determine the trajectory of your future. Live with purpose, even in the mundane moments. Joseph's life wasn't just filled with grand events, it was also shaped by his everyday decisions. Whether managing Potiphar's house or running the grain stores during the famine, Joseph lived each moment with purpose, knowing that every task had meaning. In your own life, find purpose in even the smallest actions. When you approach your daily routine with intention, you can create a life that is both fulfilling and impactful.